most interesting and provocative item description in all of Elden Ring comes from the Helfen Steeple, a greatsword received from defeating the Tibia Mariner on the cliff south of Castle Sol. The description reads as follows: Greatsword patterned after the black steeple of the Helfen, the Lampwood which guides the dead of the spirit world. The Lamplight is similar to Grace in appearance, only it is said that it can only be seen by those who met their death in battle. This description tells us several things. There is a spirit world, and in this spirit world there are dead people. Some of these dead people died in battle, and those that did can see a strange light similar to Grace that comes from a black tree or trees called the Helfen. The existence of a spirit world has dramatic implications for the lore of Elden Ring, so I'm a bit surprised more people haven't mentioned this. The first question we should ask is the spirit world depicted in-game? Personally, I don't think this is exactly true, but let's give this theory its due. There are several locations in Elden Ring that appear to be in some way separated from the lands between. Elphael, Farum Azula, and the Eternal Cities all appear on the map and can be traversed like physical locations, but they each have qualities that could be interpreted as beyond the normal physical realm. Elphael is physically separated from the lands between, and the only way to get there is by Waygate. However, this isn't entirely unique to Elphael, as the island that holds the Chapel of Anticipation is also only accessible by Waygate, but it doesn't appear to be fundamentally different from the rest of the physical world. Nothing else in Elphael seems to suggest that it's fundamentally different from the lands between. Farum Azula can only be accessed after unleashing the Flame of Ruin, and at its center is a storm which holds an arena beyond time. However, pieces of Farum Azula can be found throughout the overworld, suggesting that it also isn't fundamentally different from the rest of the lands between. The Eternal Cities are more plausible candidates. Astel's remembrance says that it once destroyed an Eternal City and took away their sky. This could refer to Noxtella's lost Black Moon, or it could refer to something else. In Nokron, something which resembles a starry sky can be seen, although it's unclear what you're really looking at. The star-like objects appear to be almost like stones, although they aren't attached to anything, they just float mysteriously, as if not obeying the laws of this world. In the background, a sort of purplish-red nebula can be seen, which is also seen in Astel's boss room. More interesting is the large lake northwest of the Ancestral Woods. This lake has many large stone pillars, somewhat resembling the lake of Erdtree trunks in the final boss arena. Also similar to the final boss arena, Renala's second phase takes place in a large, shallow lake, which appears to be somewhat detached from the physical world. These two places, being in some way magically separate from the physical world, may imply that the lake near the Ancestral Woods is also somewhat separate. In addition, the culture of ancestor spirits and ancestral spirits is obviously connected to the idea of a spirit world. Of course, all three of these locations are clearly inspired by locations in previous FromSoft games, Ash Lake and the Lake Arena for Rom from Bloodborne, two locations which are also in some way separated from the rest of the physical world. Another unique location in Elden Ring is the Roundtable Hold. This hold doesn't appear as a physical location on the map. The About Roundtable Hold tutorial says that the Roundtable Hold is located outside of this world, and that it can only be reached through sites of grace. This could mean that it literally exists in a physical place outside the lands between, but much more likely it means that it exists in some different plane or dimension. A counterpart to the Roundtable Hold can be found inside Lendel, although it appears long since abandoned, and the large grace on the table isn't present. The Roundtable Hold that serves as our hub could be a kind of memory or magical imitation of the real Roundtable Hold, although it's also possible that our hub is just the real Roundtable Hold, only at a different point in time. The final location or locations that may be connected to the spirit world are the various Evergaols scattered around the lands between. Evergaols are entered through large stone circles on the ground, and when you go inside, you appear to be in the same place. Runes dropped inside will appear outside the Evergaol in the spot where you died. However, in some sense it's not the same place. A magical barrier prevents you from wandering too far, and enemies present outside the jail aren't visible inside. The Evergaols seem to be the same place, but also not the same place, as if you are phase-shifted or in a different plane of existence. Each Evergaol has a strange, shadowy rift with a purple aura. If you come up close to it, someone emerges. Usually this someone has a colored aura like a kind of spirit, but not always. I'm not entirely sure why some of these auras are purple and some of them are blue or green. Several of these inhabitants have doubles outside the Evergaol. For instance, Vyke can be found in the Lord Contender's Evergaol in the Mountaintops of the Giants, under the name Roundtable Knight Vyke. In this Evergaol, he uses ancient dragon incantations. However, another version of Vyke can invade you near the Church of Inhibition in Liurnia. And this version, known as Festering Fingerprint Vyke, uses frenzy incantations. Vyke was once a knight of the Round Table and member of the dragon cult, loved by Lanciacs. At a later point, he encountered the Three Fingers in the Frenzied Flame. This all suggests to me that the inhabitants of the Evergaols are in some way trapped in time, either as memories or spirits, or in some other way. Most of the Evergaols are small and isolated, but one is very unique, Ordina, Liturgical Town. As you first explore Ordina, you find various spirits about the town. First-generation Albinarics, Black Knife Assassins, and Wolves. When you enter the Evergaol, you are once again transported to a same but different version of Ordina. Unlike the other Evergaols, the size of the jail here is considerably bigger, reaching around the entire town. In addition, the Purple Rift does not appear to be present. More interesting still are the now physical versions of the Albinarics and Black Knife Assassins roaming about, in a kind of reversal of what we've seen with previous Evergaols. However, the Wolves do not have a physical counterpart. Of all the areas shown in-game, the Roundtable Hold and the Evergaols appear to fit the best for something like a spirit world, or at least a place outside of the normal physical realm. However, these are still fairly small, contained areas, and neither of them contain black trees with distinctive branches and a lamplight, as the Helfen is described. Is there anything in-game that resembles the Helfen? There is one thing which could be described as a Lampwood. In various locations throughout the Lands Between, you can find these odd, translucent candle trees. Examine them, and a spirit will lead you to someplace interesting, unless you have already been to that place, in which case nothing will happen. I haven't yet been able to find a comprehensive list of these trees, so the only ones I'm aware of are in the Mistwood, the swamp near Jail Cave in Caelid, west of the Scenic Isle in Liurnia, and near the Minor Erd Tree in Altus Plateau. If anyone knows of another location, please let me know in a comment below. These trees emit light, and they certainly seem to be associated with spirits. However, they aren't black. The spirit versions are bluish, and we can find the same model used in Elphael, only as actual candle stands with apparently manufactured bases, as opposed to growing out of the ground like the spirit versions. These physical versions are white gold, like most things in Elphael. Furthermore, it might be a stretch to call this type of tree a lampwood, as the branches house candles rather than lamps. Perhaps a better name would be candle tree. The candle tree wooden shield, found in Sage's Cave, depicts something which resembles these strange spirit trees, and the description for the shield says, "Thought to represent a surreptitious prophecy of cardinal sin, the lit candle tree design was forbidden. In the final analysis, although there are some similarities, I don't see enough evidence to tie these candle trees to the Helfen." Another strange object which may be connected to the Helfen is the odd thorny sword tree which is placed outside the Fire Monk encampments in Liurnia. These objects appear around the edges of the encampments, and while they don't appear to be in Fort Lathe, there are many of them outside the Guardian's garrison in the Mountaintops of the Giants, including much larger versions. As well as being directly outside the garrison, crossing the bridge here leads us to an area filled with the corpses of fire giants, each one impaled through the torso with one of these objects. The object is a strange design, appearing partially organic and partially inorganic. There is clearly a crest and what seems like the hilt of a blade, but it also has root and thorn aspects. In my view, it's most likely that this is associated with the Briars of Sin and Thorn sorcery, as the fire monks are always accompanied by Thornfire sorcerers that wield this power. In addition, the red thorn round shield boosts fire damage negation, which may inform as to why these objects were used to impale the fire giants. The Briars of Sin are interesting in and of themselves, being a type of heretical blood magic not directly connected with Moog or the Formless Mother. But that's a whole different rabbit hole to climb down, so we'll leave it for now. Although, if anyone has any theories about what the Blood Star is, I'd love to hear them. Although these objects are fascinating and clearly significant, I don't see enough evidence to tie them to the Helfen, despite a certain visual similarity. I'd like to examine one more theory about the spirit world. Is it possible that the Lands Between is itself the spirit world? It's certainly filled with many spirits, and death takes strange forms here. In the early leaked trailer for Elden Ring, the narrator says, "You have crossed the Sea of Fog all the way to the Riftlands," indicating that the Lands Between may have originally been called the Riftlands. This might have been connected with the strange purple rifts in the Evergaols, although that's a bit of a reach. Even so, the name Lands Between begs the question, between what? One possible answer is that it's between worlds. Elden Ring, like previous FromSoft titles, shows strong influences from the manga Berserk by the late Kentaro Miura. For a few examples, Radahn's armor looks like King Gyseric's. Malekith resembles the Beast of Darkness or Guts in the Berserker armor. Miquella has many parallels with Griffith, the Crystal Tears are almost directly from the manga, the list goes on. One story element in particular from Berserk is especially relevant to this topic, so spoilers ahead. In Berserk, there is a physical world and an astral world, which contains several layers. The shallowest layer, closest to the physical realm, is called the interstice. This shallow layer is inhabited by the dead and sometimes frequented by witches or other magically inclined people. At one point in the story, the astral world is split open, spilling into the physical world and merging the two realms into a new global interstice called Fantasia. At the nexus point of this event, an enormous tree appears, known as the World Spiral Tree or just World Tree. It's a bit of a reach, but it's possible the Lands Between is some sort of interstice-like realm, between the physical and spirit world. A fog seems to separate these lands from the outside world, perhaps indicating a kind of transition from one plane of existence to the next. This might also help to partially explain why Marika told Godfrey and the Tarnished that they must die outside the Lands Between before returning. There are no obvious candidates for Helfen trees in the Lands Between, but perhaps they used to exist and have since been replaced by the Golden Erdtree, or perhaps they only exist in a deeper layer of the spirit world. This is all highly speculative, of course, but it's a fun idea to play with, so I'd love to read your comments on this theory. Let's return to the Helfen Steeple. What do we know about this sword? It's dropped by a Tibia Mariner, and it is very close to Castle Sol, a mausoleum, and a Deathrite bird. Let's start with the Deathrite bird. The red and blue feathered branch sword talismans depict a black branched sword of similar, although not identical design to the Helfen Steeple. The branches on these talismans alternate step by step, rather than the symmetrical design of the Helfen Steeple. These talismans activate when near death, boosting the respective attack and defense of the wearer. The description says that these talismans were once used in ancient death rituals, which almost certainly refers to the death rites. A combined boost to both attack and defense is provided by the Twin Bird Kite Shield, which depicts the Twin Bird, mother of the Deathbirds and envoy to an outer god. As an interesting side note, the Morion Blade from Dark Souls 3, which clearly served as the design inspiration for the Helfen Steeple, had a somewhat similar effect, boosting the attack of the wielder when they took severe damage. In addition, the Death Ritual Spear, the weapon dropped by the nearby Deathrite bird, has the same branched pattern as the talismans, and the weapon skill is similar to Helfen Steeple. Helfen Steeple's weapon skill is called Ruinous Ghostflame, and using it bathes the blade in cold Ghostflame. Ghostflame was kept by the Deathbirds, and in times of old, it was used to burn the dead. The Deathbirds would rake out the ashen remains of the dead, and from the cinders arose vengeful spirits. A similar event can be seen when killing those who live in death. When defeated, the bones of these skeletons emit a faintly blue and white aura that resembles the Ghostflame, and if the bones are also destroyed, the aura dissipates. Bones seem particularly connected to the Ghostflame, as the fallen hawks acquired the Ghostflame by burning the bones of their fellows. In addition, those who live in death often use death sorceries like Rancor Call, which bear the faint blue and white coloration of Ghostflame rather than the gold-black coloration of things related to Deathblight. It's not clear who the Tibia Mariners are exactly, why they like to summon skeletons, or why this one in particular has a weapon symbolically connected to the death rites. It is interesting, however, that the Tibia Mariners have a lamp attached to their mast which emits a light purple glow. Whether or not this is connected to the Lamplight of the Helfen is not clear, but it seems too close to be a coincidence. It's no coincidence, however, that the Helfen Steeple, the Deathrite Bird, Castle Soul, and the Mausoleum are in such close proximity to one another. Castle Soul, or at least the spirit on top of Castle Soul, appears to be dedicated to bringing on the Eclipse, as evidenced by both his dialogue and the significant placement of the Eclipse Shotel in the Church of the Eclipse. The eclipsed sun, drained of color, is the protective star of soulless demigods, and its crest appears on the shields of the Mausoleum Knights. Despite the Mausoleum Knights being headless spirits, this protective star somehow aids them by keeping destined death at bay. The phrase, drained of color, is very intriguing, as is the whole idea of the eclipse. A solar eclipse in the real world occurs when the moon passes between the Earth and the Sun, which could suggest that the eclipse in Elden Ring has something to do with the full or dark moon. The dark moon is described as leaden, which could also fit the idea of being drained of color. The spirit inside the Church of the Eclipse refers to the frigid sun of Sol, and this could connect with the cold sorceries associated with the dark moon, as well as the unique cold fire of the Ghostflame. As a side note, in Norse mythology, the underworld where dead dwell is called Hell, with one L. It's a freezing cold place, unlike the hell from Christian theology. There are many references to Norse mythology in Elden Ring, such as the World Tree Yggdrasil or the Death of Baldur, but also there is the sense in Elden Ring that before the Greater Will arrived, there were earlier pagan religions. There's also the fact that Hell is the first syllable in Helfen, although it's more likely that the name Helfen comes from the German word meaning to help, possibly referring to the guidance of the Lamplight. There are many other interesting paths we could go down regarding the eclipse and things drained of color. Somber smithing stones are also described as being drained of color, but what this implies about the dragons, I have no clue. The black flame and ghost flame could also be described as drained of color, in contrast to a more vibrant kind of fire. And in fact, the black flame did lose its true power at one point, when destined death was sealed away. The Rune of Death has a reddish hue, and weapons using its power create something that looks a lot like a red and black flame. Perhaps a full-powered version of the black flame. Perhaps there's a vibrant version of Ghost Flame as well, although again, where this speculation leads, I'm not sure yet. I also have no clear thoughts on the soulless demigods, or why the inhabitant of a mausoleum might be called an unwanted child of Queen Marika. So I'll leave that topic for another time, perhaps when I have more developed thoughts on it. On the subject of color, the Helfen Steeple is set with a distinctive red gem. This could be connected to red glintstone and blood magic, or it could just be a cool design. One thing it might imply is that the Lamplight of the Helfen is red in color. According to the description, the Lamplight is similar to Grace in appearance, so perhaps it resembles Grace in the way that it guides people, but with a red hue rather than a golden hue. Red and gold are deeply connected colors in Elden Ring, and if you'd like to hear more about that, please check out my appearance on the Yggdrasil podcast from content creator Ratatoskr. We dove at length into many of the symbolic associations in Elden Ring, and it was a great conversation. In fact, the positive feedback from that conversation is the reason that I decided to make this video in the first place. So please check out Ratatoskr's channel with the link below in the description. He has extremely insightful content on both the narrative and mechanics of Elden Ring. Perhaps we can understand the Lamplight of the Helfen better by understanding Grace, as they seem to be similar. Grace cannot be seen by everyone, but it exists to guide the Tarnished and lead them along the proper path. This path can lead to your death, but ideally it leads to becoming Elden Lord. The guidance of grace appears as golden light which points towards a particular place. This is also probably the honeyed rays of gold which deliver spirits to the Erd Tree. What's interesting about the guidance of grace is that it doesn't just point in a straight line to the Erd Tree. Instead, it points to a winding path that will allow you to become strong enough to become Elden Lord. By killing enemies and absorbing their grace in the form of runes, you can become stronger. Grace seems to describe something like a fate, a path of causally connected experiences ultimately leading to a predetermined future. As a side note, it's interesting that in Christian theology, grace is something like the aid God bestows on you despite being unworthy to receive it, and this is usually connected to the idea of original sin and living in a fallen world. There are many connections to Christian symbolism and biblical stories in Elden Ring. For example, Marika resembles Christ on the cross, complete with Lance of Longinus. Mohg has many similarities with Lucifer, being called Luminary Mohg, cast down from a holy city and rejecting grace, as well as being horned and winged. Side note within a side note, Mohg's face appears very similar to the faces of the ancient dragons. I have nothing more to say about that, but maybe someone can take that idea somewhere. Anyway, the Christian symbolism in Elden Ring is a topic that I haven't explored fully yet, so let's return to grace as it appears in the game. So what is grace and what does it do? Grace comes from the Erd Tree. It can take the form of runes, which when dropped appear to turn into a little tree themselves, or in the form of rays of light guiding a Tarnished to become Elden Lord. It can be inferred that grace is at least partially made up of something like the spirit or essence of particular dead people, who are in some way connected to the Erd Tree. So how does this help us understand the Lamplight of the Helfen? The Lamplight also exists to guide people, although to what end is not clear. The branch sword talismans talk about tenaciously clinging to life, and the Helfen Lamplight appears only to those who died in battle. Both of these seem to parallel somewhat the struggle that the guidance of grace leads you through. In fact, there are even what you could call golden analogs to the branch sword talismans, the ritual sword and shield talismans, although these take effect at full health rather than low health. If the Helfen Lamplight is red rather than gold, there are 3 possible connections that might have significance. An effect very similar to the guidance of grace can be found in the Forbidden Lands, although it's red instead of gold. These rays don't seem to lead anywhere in particular, and they appear to lack the order of our familiar gold rays. What this implies, I have no idea. Grace can also be seen in the eyes as a golden hue. Red-hued eyes can be seen in various places. Demi-humans' eyes glow red at night, indicating that they're stronger than normal. In addition, the player's eyes can become red if following Vare's quest line, although the effect is not the same, and I think these are probably unrelated, or at least only distantly related. So where does that all leave us? Like with most things in Elden Ring, with more questions than answers. We know there is a spirit world inhabited by dead people, and one or more black trees with distinctive branches which emit a light similar to grace in appearance. This light may be red and may be connected to blood magic or destined death. It could be formed out of some kind of essence of people in a similar way that grace is. But the ultimate purpose of this enigmatic tree and lamplight remains a mystery. For the final part of this video, I want to dive into some really unhinged speculation, so treat all this with appropriate skepticism. There are a number of things in the game which might connect very, very loosely to the branching pattern of the Helfen. There is in fact one plant in the game which is black and has an interesting branching sort of pattern. Deathroot. At least the roots which appear near Godwyn's body. The rune of death spread throughout Great Tree roots, not Erd Tree roots, which is interesting. Could the Helfen be the Great Tree? Perhaps something mirrored or supplanted by the Erd Tree. The Curse Mark of Death and the Mending Rune of the Death Prince also have a kind of branching pattern, which may be connected. Or maybe all of this is just crazy talk. Several people have argued that a rune can be seen in the dark moon. While I was initially skeptical of this, I'm slowly coming around to the idea that maybe there is something here. If you look at the Elden Ring depicted in the title screen, we can see how many of the great runes fit into the pattern of rings. Radagon's crosshatch pattern can also be seen in the background. What if we remove the runes that we know about? We get something that looks like this. Presumably the semicircle at the top is Marika's symbol, so let's remove that too. If there is a rune on the dark moon, it looks strikingly similar to this pattern. Whether this would be Ranni's rune or something else, it's certainly intriguing. It also looks similar to the candle tree design on the candle tree shield, and more loosely resembles the Helfen Steeple, Death Ritual Spear, and Branch Sword designs. Finally, when you defeat Malekith, the Rune of Death appears out of a black fog. It looks very root or tree-like, and the design somewhat resembles a sword with a large hilt and branches coming off the blade, like the Helfen Steeple. The rune is then swallowed by red flames, which to me indicates that this visualization of the Rune of Death is only a depiction of it in its sealed state. When it's unbound, the tree-like rune burns. What any of this implies, I'll leave up to your imagination. Well, that's all I have on the Helfen for now. Please comment below with any other theories or observations you guys have, no matter how crazy, and please let me know what you think of the video. If you have any ideas for future videos, let me know in the comments as well. I'd like to thank Ducks in Plaid, who made a very insightful comment about the candle trees which helped me make this video, and also Ratatoskr, who, as I said, helped springboard me onto YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.